Where are you going dressed like that?" The words cut through the marble corridor like a knife through silk, stopping Elena Ricci mid-step. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she turned slowly, the crimson fabric of her borrowed dress swirling around her knees. Dante Salvatore stood at the end of the hallway, framed by the golden light of the chandelier overhead, his dark suit immaculate, his expression unreadable except for the muscle ticking in his jaw. His eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that had watched empires rise and fall without a flicker of emotion, swept over her with an intensity that made her skin burn. Elena had worked in the Salvatore estate for 2 years, moving through these halls like a ghost. She cleaned the priceless marble, dusted the Renaissance paintings, served coffee in bone china cups, and existed in the careful silence that all good help maintained. She had perfected the art of invisibility, keeping her eyes down, her movements efficient, her presence forgettable. In a world that belonged to men like Dante Salvatore, men who controlled the hidden currents of power flowing through Naples like underground rivers, invisibility was safety. But tonight, standing in a dress the color of fresh blood, Elena felt anything but invisible. Welcome to Eden Romance Stories, besties. This is our second video. My friend dared me to prove I am not a failure and get 1,000 subscribers in 2 weeks. Help me prove her wrong. Like my video, drop a comment of encouragement, and subscribe. It will make me very happy. I asked you a question, Elena. Dante's voice dropped lower, each syllable precise and deliberate. He moved toward her with the kind of controlled grace that reminded her exactly who he was. Not just the owner of this estate, not just a wealthy businessman with legitimate holdings across southern Italy. He was a man whose word could end lives or save them, whose family name had been written in blood and loyalty for 3 generations. "I'm going out, Mr. Salvatore," she managed, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her voice. "It's my night off." His eyes narrowed, dark and assessing. Out where? With whom? Elena felt the familiar weight of being small, of being insignificant, settling over her shoulders like a heavy cloak. But something new pushed back against it tonight. Maybe it was the dress her friend Julia had insisted she borrow, the way the fabric made her feel like someone worth noticing. Maybe it was the exhaustion of 2 years spent being no one, watching life happen to other people while she remained on the sidelines. Maybe it was turning 26 and realizing she had nothing to show for it, except calloused hands and a savings account that would never be enough to change her circumstances. "With a friend," she said carefully, "to a restaurant in the city. Just dinner." A friend. Dante repeated the word as if tasting something bitter. He was close now, close enough that she could smell the faint trace of his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably cost more than her monthly salary. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. What kind of friend takes you out looking like this? Heat flooded her cheeks, part embarrassment, part anger. Looking like what, exactly? His gaze traveled over her again, slower this time, and she watched something flicker behind those cold eyes. Something that looked almost like heat, like hunger, like a man seeing something he wanted and was trying very hard not to reach for. Like you're trying to get yourself killed. Do you have any idea what kind of attention a woman draws in a dress like that, in this city? At night? "I think I can handle myself, Mr. Salvatore. Can you?" Dante's hand shot out, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the electricity of almost contact, close enough that her breath caught in her throat. "Do you know who runs the restaurants you're planning to visit? Do you know whose eyes will be on you the moment you walk through the door? Do you understand what it means when someone like you catches the wrong kind of attention in my city?" Someone like her. The words stung more than they should have, She was still just the maid to him, even now. Even dressed like this, even standing here, trying to be someone different for one single night. "I'm not your responsibility, Mr. Salvatore." Something dangerous flashed across his face, something that made her take an involuntary step backward. "That's where you're wrong." He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "Marco will drive you. Paolo will be inside the restaurant. You won't see him, but he'll be watching. If anything feels wrong, if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell Marco immediately, and you come home. I don't need your security detail." It wasn't a request. Dante's tone left no room for argument. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time since she had started working in his home, Elena felt seen. Not as the invisible woman who cleaned his study or brought him espresso at dawn. Not as a piece of furniture that happened to move and breathe, but as a person, as a woman, as someone who existed beyond her function in his household. The weight of that attention was almost too much to bear. It made her want to run, to hide, to return to the safety of being overlooked. But it also made something inside her chest tighten with a feeling she couldn't quite name. Something warm and terrifying and completely inappropriate. She wanted to argue, to tell him he had no right to control her life outside these walls, to remind him that she was a free person who could do whatever she wanted on her own time. But the truth was more complicated than that. Working for Dante Salvatore meant existing in the margins of a world most people only glimpsed in movies or whispered about in cafes. A world where debts were collected in violence and loyalty was the only currency that truly mattered. A world where stepping outside without protection could mean stepping into danger she couldn't even begin to understand. And despite the anger simmering in her chest at being treated like a possession, there was also something else. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. The knowledge that someone was watching out for her, even if his methods were controlling and his reasons unclear. "Fine," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. Dante's expression didn't soften, but something shifted in his eyes. Something that looked almost like satisfaction, or maybe relief of his own. "Who is this friend?" "His name is Alessio. He's a medical student. We met at the market last week when I was buying vegetables for the kitchen." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted the confession when Dante's jaw tightened, when that muscle in his cheek started ticking again. "A medical student." He said it like a curse, like an insult. "And he asked you to dinner." "Yes." "Does he know where you work?" Elena hesitated, suddenly aware that this conversation had shifted into dangerous territory. "No, I didn't tell him. I just said I worked in a private household." For a moment, Dante just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he stepped closer. So close, she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. So close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You don't tell anyone where you work. You don't tell anyone who employs you. You don't mention this address or my name or anything that could connect you to me. Do you understand, Elena? This isn't about control. It's about keeping you alive." The words should have frightened her, should have reminded her that she was working for a dangerous man in a dangerous world. Instead, they did something else entirely. They made her pulse quicken, made her hyper-aware of how close he was standing, made her wonder when exactly Dante Salvatore had started caring whether she lived or died. "I understand," she managed. "Good." But he didn't move away. His hand came up, hovering near her shoulder, and for one breathless moment, she thought he might touch her. Thought he might close that final distance and make contact. Instead, his fingers curled into a fist and dropped back to his side, as if he was forcing himself not to reach for something he wanted. "Marco is waiting downstairs. Don't make him wait long." Elena nodded, not trusting her voice, and turned toward the elevator. She could feel Dante's eyes on her back the entire way, burning through the crimson fabric like a brand, marking her as his, even though she had no right to be. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a different world. Marco was waiting by a black sedan that probably cost more than Elena would make in 5 years. He opened the door without comment, his expression professionally blank, and Elena slipped into the leather interior, feeling like an imposter playing dress-up. The restaurant Alessio had chosen was in the heart of Naples, tucked into a side street near the historic district. It was the kind of place Elena had walked past 1,000 times without ever imagining she might eat there. White tablecloths, crystal stemware, waiters in crisp uniforms who moved with practiced efficiency. When she walked in, she saw Alessio already waiting at a corner table, his face lighting up when he spotted her. He was handsome in that clean-cut, wholesome way that should have made her heart flutter. Warm brown eyes, an easy smile, the kind of face that belonged to someone who saved lives and had never seen the darker side of the world. He stood as she approached, pulling out her chair with careful courtesy. "Elena, you look amazing," he said, and his appreciation seemed genuine, uncomplicated. "Thank you. This is a beautiful restaurant." She settled into her seat, hyper-aware of Paolo somewhere in the room, watching with unseen eyes. The knowledge should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, it made her feel strangely protected. Alessio launched into conversation easily, talking about his clinical rotations, the challenging cases he was seeing, his plans to specialize in cardiology. He was animated, passionate about his work, and Elena found herself relaxing slightly as she listened. This was normal. This was what normal people did on dates. They talked about their jobs and their dreams and their futures without worrying about who was watching or what might happen if they said the wrong thing. If you are enjoying this video so far, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because you will not want to miss what happens next. Trust me, things are about to get very interesting. But as the evening wore on, something started to feel off. Alessio asked her questions, but he didn't seem particularly interested in her answers. When she mentioned that she worked in housekeeping, she saw his attention waver, saw the subtle shift in his expression that told her she had just become less interesting. He started looking around the restaurant more, checking his phone, his focus drifting. "So, housekeeping," he said eventually, swirling his wine. "That must be steady work at least." "It is," Elena said carefully. "No ambitions to do something else? Go back to school, maybe?" The question stung, even though she knew he didn't mean it to. "I'm saving money. Maybe someday." Right. Alessio nodded, but she could tell he was already categorizing her, filing her away as someone who wasn't worth the investment, someone who cleaned houses instead of saving lives, or building things, or doing anything that mattered in his world. Elena caught a glimpse of a man at the bar, his attention seemingly on his drink, but his posture too alert, too watchful. Paolo. She wondered what he was reporting back to Dante, whether he was noting every moment of her humiliation, every second of this disaster of a date. When Alessio excused himself to take a phone call, Elena sat alone at the table, feeling foolish in her borrowed dress. She had wanted one night of normalcy, one taste of a life that belonged to people who didn't spend their days scrubbing floors and polishing silver. Instead, she was being reminded of exactly where she belonged. Nowhere that mattered. Alessio returned eventually, but the energy had shifted. He made polite conversation through the rest of dinner, but Elena could tell he was already planning his exit strategy. When the check came, he paid with a credit card that had his father's name on it, and Elena felt another small piece of her dignity crumble away. Outside the restaurant, Alessio walked her toward the street where Marco was already waiting. Elena could see the exact moment Alessio noticed the car, noticed the driver in the expensive suit, noticed that she apparently had access to the kind of wealth he had assumed she would never touch. "That's quite a ride for housekeeping staff," Alessio said, something calculating entering his expression. "My employer provides transportation," Elena said carefully, remembering Dante's warnings. Must be some employer. Alessio's whole demeanor changed, becoming more attentive, more interested. Maybe I could meet him sometime. I have colleagues who work with wealthy families. Could be good networking. And there it was, the real reason for his sudden renewed interest. Not because he actually cared about her, but because he thought she might be a connection to something more valuable, a gateway to wealth and opportunity. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. "I don't think that would be appropriate." Alessio's smile turned tight. "Right. Well, it was nice meeting you, Elena. Maybe I'll call you sometime." They both knew he wouldn't. He turned and walked back toward the restaurant, without even waiting to see her safely into the car. Elena stood there on the sidewalk, feeling foolish and small and utterly disposable, before Marco opened the sedan door with a respectful nod. The ride back to the estate was silent. Elena stared out the window, watching Naples slide past in a blur of lights and shadows. She had wanted one normal night, one glimpse of a life that didn't revolve around serving people who would never see her as an equal. Instead, she had been reminded that people like Alessio would only ever see her as either irrelevant or useful, never as someone worth knowing for her own sake. When they pulled up to the estate, Elena expected to slip back inside unnoticed, to retreat to her small room in the staff quarters and pretend this night had never happened. Instead, Dante was waiting in the main hall, his jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He looked up as she entered, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "How was dinner?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Fine," Elena lied, moving toward the stairs. "Marco said your date left you standing on the sidewalk." Dante's voice stopped her mid-step. Heat flooded her face. Of course Marco had reported back. Of course Dante knew every humiliating detail. It wasn't a big deal. Wasn't it? Dante moved toward her with that same predatory grace, and Elena found herself backing up until her shoulders hit the wall. He didn't touch her, but he was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Did he treat you well, Elena? Did he make you feel like you mattered? Did he see you the way you deserve to be seen?" The questions were too intimate, too raw. Elena's throat tightened. "Why do you care?" "Because I do." The words came out rough, almost angry. "Because for 2 years you've walked through this house like a ghost, and I never once stopped to actually see you. I passed you in hallways. I drank the coffee you made. I lived in the spaces you cleaned. And I never once looked at you as anything more than part of the furniture. And now I can't stop seeing you. Now I notice every time you walk into a room. Now I care who you have dinner with, and whether they're good enough for you, and whether they make you smile the way you should be smiled at." Elena's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Mr. Salvatore, I don't think—" "Dante," he interrupted, his voice dropping to something almost pleading. "When it's just us, you call me Dante. Please." The intimacy of it stole her breath, the vulnerability in his voice, the raw honesty in his eyes, the way he was looking at her like she was something precious he was afraid to break. "This isn't appropriate. I work for you. I depend on you for my livelihood. I know." His hand came up, his fingers brushing along her jaw with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. "I know exactly how inappropriate this is. You work for me. You live under my roof. Every rule of decent behavior says I should walk away right now and pretend this conversation never happened. Every ounce of self-control I've built over 34 years is screaming at me to step back. Then why don't you?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Dante's thumb traced the curve of her lower lip, and Elena's eyes fluttered closed. Because I've spent my entire life following rules, building an empire on discipline and control, and never letting anyone see weakness. And then you walked out tonight in that red dress, and suddenly I don't care about any of it. I just care about making sure no one else gets to see you like this. Making sure no one else gets to touch you, or talk to you, or make you feel like you're not the most important person in whatever room you're standing in. His words wrapped around her like chains, binding her to him in ways she didn't fully understand. Elena knew she should pull away, should remember her place, should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak of wanting something she could never have. But when Dante leaned in, his breath warm against her cheek, all her carefully constructed defenses crumbled. "I can't do this," she whispered, even as her hands came up to rest against his chest, even as she felt his heart hammering beneath her palms. "I know." But he didn't move away. His other hand slid into her hair, tilting her face up toward his. "Tell me to stop, Elena. Tell me this is a mistake, and I'll walk away. I'll make sure you never have to see me again if that's what you want. I'll find you another position somewhere safe, somewhere you can build the life you deserve without my world touching you." Did she want that? The question echoed through her mind as she stared up at him, at this man who controlled an empire built on violence and power. This man who was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The smart answer was yes. The safe answer was yes. The answer that would protect her heart was definitely yes. But Elena had spent her entire life being smart and safe and invisible. And where had it gotten her? Standing alone on sidewalks, dismissed by men who saw her as either irrelevant or useful, but never as someone worth knowing. Never as someone worth fighting for. Instead of answering with words, she pushed up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was everything, and nothing like she had imagined. Dante made a sound low in his throat, something between a groan and a growl, and then his arms were around her, pulling her flush against him. His mouth moved over hers with a hunger that stole her breath, claiming her in a way that should have terrified her, but instead made her feel alive for the first time in years. One of his hands tangled in her hair, while the other splayed across her lower back, holding her so close she could feel every hard plane of his body against her softer curves. Elena's hands slid up to lock behind his neck, holding him to her as if she could keep this moment from ending through sheer force of will. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. His eyes were dark, pupils blown wide, and his hands were shaking slightly where they held her. "This changes everything," he murmured. Reality crashed back in with brutal clarity. Elena's mind started spinning, processing what she had just done. She had kissed her employer, the head of one of Naples's most powerful families. A man who could destroy her with a single word, who could make her disappear if he decided she was a liability. What had she been thinking? "I should go," she managed, trying to pull away. "I need to think. I can't think when you're this close. Elena, wait." But she was already pulling free, already running for the stairs that led to the staff quarters. Behind her, she heard Dante curse in Italian, the words sharp and frustrated, but he didn't follow. She was grateful for that small mercy, even as part of her wished he would chase her, would refuse to let her go. Back in her tiny room, Elena collapsed onto the narrow bed, still wearing the red dress that had started all of this. Her lips were still tingling from Dante's kiss, her body still humming with awareness. She had crossed a line tonight that couldn't be uncrossed, had allowed herself to want something that belonged in fantasies, not reality. But even as she told herself it was a mistake, even as she tried to convince herself to forget it ever happened, Elena couldn't stop touching her lips, couldn't stop remembering the way Dante had looked at her, like she was precious, like she was worth fighting for, like she was his. Sleep came in fits and starts, her dreams filled with dark eyes and dangerous promises, and the feeling of strong arms holding her like she was something worth keeping. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through her small window. Elena dressed in her usual uniform, black dress and white apron, trying to erase all evidence of the woman she had been last night. When she made her way downstairs to begin her morning duties, she half expected everything to be different. But the estate looked exactly as it always did. Pristine marble floors, priceless artwork on the walls, the scent of fresh espresso drifting from the kitchen. She was making her way toward the service area when she heard voices coming from Dante's study. Male voices, speaking in rapid Italian. Elena knew she should move away, should give them privacy, should maintain the careful boundaries that all good staff observed. But something in the tone made her pause, made her step closer to the partially open door. "The shipment was intercepted last night," a gravelly voice said. "Someone tipped off the authorities. We lost everything." "How much?" That was Dante, his voice cold and controlled in a way that made her shiver. 3 million in merchandise, plus the vehicles and the facility. The men barely got out before the raid. 2 of them are in the hospital. A long silence. Elena held her breath, pressing herself against the wall. She knew she should leave, knew she was hearing things that could get her killed, but she couldn't seem to make her feet move. "Find out who talked," Dante said finally, each word carefully measured. "I want names by tonight, and I want to know how deep the leak goes. Check everyone who had access to that information." "Already on it, boss. But there's something else. Word on the street is that the Rossi family is making moves, testing our borders in the north. They think we're distracted with the investigation." Then we remind them why that's a mistake. Dante's voice dropped to something dangerous, something that sent chills down Elena's spine. "Set up a meeting with their underboss, somewhere public. I want them to understand that we're not weak just because we're careful. And I want our people visible in their neighborhoods, not causing trouble, just letting them know we're watching. Keep watching because something is about to happen that will change everything for Elena and Dante. You will not want to miss this." "What about the girl?" a different voice asked, younger, uncertain. Elena's breath caught. Were they talking about her? "What about her?" Dante's tone turned sharp, dangerous. "Word got out that you had Marco driving her around last night, that you put Paolo on her. People are talking, wondering why you're protecting some housemaid." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to quiet her breathing. "Her name is Elena," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. "And anyone who has a problem with my decisions can bring them to me directly. Is that understood?" "Yes, boss. Of course. I just thought you should know what people are saying." "I know exactly what people are saying. Now get out. All of you. I have work to do." Elena heard movement, footsteps approaching the door. She panicked, looking for somewhere to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The door swung open, and 3 men filed out, all of them freezing when they spotted her standing there. For a moment, no one moved. The men stared at her with expressions ranging from surprise to suspicion to carefully controlled blankness. Elena felt her face burning, felt the weight of their judgment, felt exposed in a way that made her want to disappear into the marble floor. "Elena." Dante's voice came from inside the study, sharp and commanding. "Come in here." The men stepped aside, creating a path for her. Elena forced her feet to move, walking into the study on legs that felt like water. Dante was sitting behind his massive desk, his expression unreadable. He waited until the door closed behind her before speaking. "How much did you hear?" Elena's throat was dry. "I wasn't trying to listen. I was just passing by and I heard voices. And I should have kept walking, but I didn't. And I'm so sorry. I'll never... Elena. Dante stood, moving around the desk. How much did you hear? Enough, she whispered, lifting her chin. I heard enough to remember who you really are. What you really do. Something flickered in Dante's eyes. Pain, maybe, or resignation. He stopped a few feet away from her, maintaining distance, as if he was afraid of what might happen if he got too close. And who is that? Someone dangerous. Someone involved in things I don't understand. Someone I should definitely stay away from. Dante's jaw tightened. You're right. You should stay far away from me, from all of this. I deal in things that would horrify you. I make decisions that keep me up at night. And I won't apologize for any of it, because this is the world I was born into. The legacy I inherited when my father was murdered in front of me when I was 20 years old. The confession made Elena's breath catch. She had known Dante's father was dead, but she hadn't known how. Hadn't known that Dante had witnessed it. I had a choice then, Dante continued, his voice rough. I could have walked away, let the empire crumble, let our enemies carve up everything my family had built over 3 generations. Or I could step up and become what was needed. So I hardened myself. I learned to make impossible choices. I built walls so high that nothing could touch me. He paused, his eyes finding hers. Until I saw you in that red dress, and suddenly all those walls started crumbling, and I remembered what it felt like to want something beyond duty and legacy. Elena's heart was racing. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know who you're dealing with, what you're walking into if you choose to stay. I won't lie to you, Elena. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. Dante took a step closer, then another, until he was standing directly in front of her. I'm a dangerous man who does dangerous things to protect the people and the legacy I'm responsible for. But with you, I want to be different. With you, I want to be just a man who makes you coffee in the morning and listens to your dreams and holds you when the world feels too heavy. Tears pricked at Elena's eyes. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the vulnerability he was showing her. This was Dante Salvatore, the man whose name made grown men nervous, standing in front of her looking almost lost. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. I don't know how to exist in your world. Then don't exist in mine. Let me exist in yours. Dante's hand came up slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and cupped her face with a gentleness that stole her breath. Let me learn how to be normal with you, how to be soft, how to care about something more than survival and power. What if I can't handle it? What if I hear something or see something that's too much? Then you tell me, and we figure it out together. I won't lie to you about what I do, but I also won't force you to be part of it. You can exist in the light while I handle the darkness. All I'm asking is that you don't run, that you give us, a chance. Elena looked up at him, at this complicated, dangerous man who was offering her something she had never dared to hope for. Not just romance or passion, but genuine partnership. The chance to be seen and valued and chosen by someone who could have anyone, but was choosing her. Okay, she breathed. Okay. Hope flared in Dante's eyes. I'll try. I'll stay. I'll give this a chance. Elena took a shaky breath. But I need you to be honest with me. Always. Even when the truth is ugly. Especially when the truth is ugly. I promise. Dante pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious. No lies between us, even when it's hard. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped up in each other, finding comfort in the connection neither of them had expected, but both of them desperately needed. When Dante finally pulled back, his expression had shifted into something more determined. I need to handle some things today, he said. business that can't wait. But tonight, have dinner with me. Here, in the private dining room, just the two of us. Let me show you that I can be more than what you heard through that door." It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. It was an invitation from a man who was trying very hard to be someone different than he usually was. Elena found herself nodding before she could second-guess the decision. "What time?" 8. Dante's expression softened slightly. "And Elena?" "Wear whatever makes you comfortable. I don't care about the dress or the presentation. I just want you there." Then he was gone, striding back toward his desk with renewed purpose, already pulling out his phone to make calls. Elena slipped out of the study, her mind spinning with everything that had just happened. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Elena went through her usual routine, cleaning and organizing, and trying to process the dramatic shift her life had taken. The other staff members watched her with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. Maria, the head cook who had been with the family for 2 decades, finally cornered her in the kitchen around mid-afternoon. "You're different today," Maria said, kneading dough with practiced efficiency. "I don't know what you mean," Elena lied, scrubbing at an already spotless counter. Maria made a sound that was half laugh, half sigh. "Child, I've worked in this house long enough to recognize when something has shifted. I see the way he looks at you now. I see the way you look at him when you think no one's watching." Elena's face burned. "It's not like that." "Isn't it?" Maria's expression was gentle but knowing. "I'm not judging you, Elena. God knows that man could use someone who sees him as more than just the boss. But you need to be careful. Men like Mr. Salvatore, they don't do anything halfway. When they want something, they take it. When they love something, they consume it. And when they're done, they move on." The warning settled like lead in Elena's stomach. "He's not like that. He wouldn't. I'm not saying he would deliberately hurt you," Maria interrupted. "But his world is dangerous, child. You heard some of that today, I think. Don't try to deny it. I know you were near his study when his men were there." She paused in her kneading, meeting Elena's eyes directly. "All I'm saying is remember who you are. Remember where you come from. Don't lose yourself trying to fit into a world that was never meant for people like us." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to defend what was growing between her and Dante. But the truth was, Maria had a point. She was a housekeeper from a nothing town outside Rome, orphaned young, with no family and no safety net. Dante was the head of a powerful organization with roots going back generations. The gap between them wasn't just wide, it was a chasm. But even knowing all that, even understanding the risk, Elena couldn't bring herself to walk away. Not yet. Not when Dante looked at her like she hung the moon. Not when his touch made her feel alive for the first time in years. Not when he was willing to show her vulnerability and honesty in a world where both were dangerous luxuries. When 8 o'clock arrived, Elena found herself standing outside the private dining room in a simple navy dress she had bought with her first paycheck from working at the estate. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but it was hers, and it made her feel like herself rather than trying to be someone she wasn't. She knocked softly on the door, and Dante's voice called for her to enter. When she stepped inside, her breath caught. The room had been transformed. Candles flickered on every available surface, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The long, formal table had been replaced with a smaller, more intimate one set for 2. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers, something achingly beautiful that she didn't recognize. Dante stood by the window, looking out over the city lights. He had changed from his usual suit into dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking both more casual and somehow more attractive than usual. When he turned and saw her, his expression softened into something that made her chest tight. "You came," he said, as if he had genuinely been uncertain. "You asked me to. I know. But after this morning, after everything you heard, I thought maybe you'd change your mind." Dante crossed to her, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips in a gesture that was old-fashioned and somehow perfectly him. "I'm glad you're here." He pulled out her chair with old-world courtesy, waiting until she was seated before taking his own place across from her. For a moment they just looked at each other, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them. "Tell me about yourself," Dante said finally. "Not the things I could read in your employment file, the real things. What makes Elena Ricci happy? What keeps you up at night? What do you dream about when you let yourself dream?" The questions caught her off guard. She had expected seduction, maybe charm, not this genuine curiosity, this sincere desire to know her as a person. "I don't usually let myself dream much," she admitted. "Dreams feel dangerous when you're living paycheck to paycheck, when you have no one to fall back on if things go wrong. But if you could dream, if money and security weren't concerns..." Elena considered the question, really thought about it for maybe the first time in years. "I'd want a garden. Somewhere quiet where I could grow things, watch them change with the seasons. Maybe write if I was brave enough. Poetry, I think. Small observations about the world that most people overlook because they're too busy rushing past." When she looked up, Dante was staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You write poetry?" "Sometimes. In my head, mostly. I've never actually written any of it down." "Why not?" "Because it feels presumptuous. Like I'm pretending to be something I'm not. Someone educated or cultured or worthy of having their words preserved." Dante's expression turned fierce. "You're not pretending anything. You are a poet who hasn't written her poems yet. There's a difference. And anyone who made you feel like your words weren't worth preserving was a fool who didn't deserve to hear them." The conviction in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. "What about you?" she asked, needing to shift the focus. What would Dante Salvatore do if he could walk away from all of this? His expression darkened, shadows crossing his face. "I don't get to walk away. This life, this responsibility, it's mine whether I want it or not. My father built this empire with blood and loyalty and impossible choices. When he died, when I watched him bleed out on the floor of our family restaurant, while my mother screamed and I was too young and too powerless to do anything, it became mine to protect. The men who work for me, their families, the legitimate businesses we run, they all depend on the decisions I make every single day. I can't just abandon that." "But if you could," Elena pressed gently, seeing the pain in his eyes and wanting to ease it somehow. Dante was quiet for a long moment, staring at his wine glass. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost wistful. "I'd want peace. A house by the sea where I could hear the waves instead of sirens and shouting. Maybe a dog, something loyal and simple. Someone to share breakfast with who doesn't want anything from me except my company, who sees me as just a man instead of a name or a position or a source of power." The image he painted was so at odds with the man she knew, the man whose reputation made people nervous, that Elena felt her heart crack open. "That sounds beautiful." "It sounds impossible." But his eyes found hers across the table. "Until I met you. Now I find myself thinking about impossible things, imagining futures I have no right to imagine, wondering what it would be like to wake up next to someone who cares about me rather than what I can do for them." Before Elena could respond, staff entered with the first course. The meal that followed was exquisite, each dish more delicious than the last. But Elena barely tasted any of it. She was too focused on the man across from her, on the way he listened when she talked about her childhood in Rome, on the small smiles he gave her when she said something that surprised him, on the way his eyes tracked her every movement like he was afraid she might disappear if he looked away. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they had read, places they had dreamed of visiting, memories from childhood that had shaped who they had become. Dante told her about his mother, taken suddenly by an aneurysm when he was just 12, how it had shattered his father into someone harder and colder. About the crushing weight of expectation that had followed his father's death, the men who had tried to take advantage of his youth, the first time he had to make a decision that cost someone their life, and how it had nearly broken him. "I was 23, he said quietly, swirling his wine. "There was a man, one of my father's oldest friends, who had been skimming money from our operations. Small amounts at first, then larger. I confronted him, gave him a chance to explain, to make it right. He pulled a gun instead. Tried to kill me right there in my own office." "What happened?" Elena whispered. "My security killed him first, and I had to decide what to do with his family, his wife and 2 sons, who had no idea what he'd been doing. Every one of my advisors said to cut them off, make an example, show that betrayal had consequences. But I couldn't do it. I set them up with new identities, a house in Milan, enough money to start over, and half my own men thought I was weak for it. But you weren't," Elena said firmly. "You were showing mercy, showing that you're more than just the violence." Dante looked at her with something like wonder. "That's exactly what my mother would have said. She always believed there was a better way, that we could use our power to protect instead of just dominate. She sounds like she was an amazing woman. She was. You would have liked her. She would have loved you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. By the time dessert arrived, something had shifted between them. They weren't just employer and employee anymore, weren't just 2 people testing the boundaries of attraction. They were connecting on a deeper level, finding common ground in their shared losses, their complicated relationships with legacy and expectation, their desire for something more than what they had been given. When dinner finally ended, Dante led her to a small sitting room Elena had never seen before. It was clearly his private space, filled with well-worn books and comfortable furniture that actually looked lived in rather than just decorative. He poured them each a small glass of wine, then joined her on the sofa, close enough that their knees touched. "Thank you for tonight," Elena said softly, cradling her glass, "for sharing all of that with me, for being honest." Dante set down his wine, turning to face her fully. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb stroking along her cheekbone with achingly gentle precision. "I should be thanking you, for giving me this, for not running when you had every reason to, for seeing me as something more than just what I do." His thumb traced along her jaw, then lower, ghosting over her lips. Elena's breath caught, her eyes fluttering closed. When she opened them again, Dante was watching her with an intensity that made her feel naked despite being fully clothed. "I want to kiss you again," he said, his voice rough. "But I need you to know what it means if I do. I need you to understand that I don't do casual, Elena. I don't know how to want something without consuming it, without making it mine in every way that matters. If I kiss you now, if we cross this line again, I'm not going to be able to let you go easily." Elena's heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. Every logical part of her brain screamed at her to pull back, to maintain boundaries, to protect herself before she fell too deep into something that could destroy her. But her heart, that traitorous thing, was already tumbling headfirst into feelings she couldn't control. "Then kiss me," she whispered, "and don't let go." The smile that crossed Dante's face was like sunrise after the darkest night. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, to pull away. When his lips finally met hers, the kiss was soft and sweet and full of promises neither of them could quite put into words. But then something shifted. The kiss deepened, became more urgent, more consuming. Dante's hand slid into her hair, tilting her head to give him better access, as his tongue swept into her mouth. Elena made a sound, low in her throat, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. His eyes were dark, pupils blown wide, and his hands were shaking slightly where they held her. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured. "Not for anything except being close. I just want to hold you, want to fall asleep knowing you're here, that this is real." Every logical part of Elena's brain screamed at her to say no, to maintain some kind of boundary, to protect herself, to remember that this was her employer and getting involved was dangerous on multiple levels. But her heart was already answering before her brain could catch up. "Just to sleep?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Just to sleep," Dante confirmed, his hand cradling the back of her head with infinite tenderness. "I won't push for more than you're ready to give. I just need you close. Please, Elena. Let me hold you." It was the vulnerability in his voice that decided her. This powerful man, this boss whose reputation commanded respect through fear and loyalty, was asking her to stay with the desperation of someone who had been alone too long. How could she possibly say no to that? "Okay," she whispered. The relief that crossed Dante's face was almost overwhelming. He stood, offering her his hand, like a gentleman from another era, and led her through corridors she had never explored before. His private quarters were stunning in their understated elegance, all dark wood and leather, masculine and imposing, but somehow inviting. The bed was enormous, covered in soft linens that probably cost more than she made in a month. Dante disappeared into the bathroom, returning a moment later with one of his shirts. "You can wear this if you want. I'll give you privacy to change." He stepped out onto the balcony, closing the door behind him to give her space. Elena changed quickly, the soft cotton engulfing her small frame, falling to mid-thigh and smelling like him. When she called out that she was ready, Dante came back inside, his expression softening when he saw her. "You look perfect," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. He changed into sleep pants and nothing else, and Elena tried very hard not to stare at the expanse of his chest, at the tattoos that covered his ribs and shoulder. Tried not to think about all the stories those marks probably told, the violence and loss they likely commemorated. When they finally settled into bed, Dante pulled her against him with careful reverence, her back to his chest, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. It should have felt awkward or presumptuous. Instead, it felt like coming home to a place she hadn't known existed. "Tell me something," Dante murmured into her hair, his breath warm against her neck. "Something you've never told anyone else." Elena was quiet for a moment, thinking about what she wanted to share, what felt safe to reveal. Sometimes when I'm cleaning the gallery, I stand in front of the paintings and imagine what the artist was feeling when they created them. I make up whole stories in my head about their lives, their loves, their heartbreaks. I give them names and histories and reasons for every brushstroke. It's silly, I know, but it makes me feel less alone. It's not silly, it's beautiful. Dante's arm tightened around her, pulling her more securely against him. My turn. I haven't slept through the night in 3 years, not since I took over from my father. Every sound, every shadow. I'm always waiting for the next crisis, the next betrayal, the next fight. But right now, holding you like this, I think I might actually sleep. You make me feel safe in a way nothing has in years." The confession made Elena's throat tight with unshed tears. She laced her fingers through his, holding their joined hands against her chest, directly over her heart. "Then sleep, Dante. I'll be here when you wake up, I promise." "You promise?" His voice was small, vulnerable in a way that made her heart ache. "I promise." She felt Dante relax behind her, his breathing gradually evening out into the steady rhythm of sleep. And true to his word, within minutes, he was completely unconscious, his grip on her never loosening, as if, even in sleep, he was afraid she might disappear. Elena lay awake longer, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the rise and fall of his chest against her back, marveling at the trust he was showing her. This man who controlled an empire, who made decisions that affected hundreds of lives, who held power that most people couldn't even imagine, was sleeping peacefully for the first time in years because she was there. The weight of the trust was almost overwhelming, but it was also precious, a gift she hadn't expected and didn't take lightly. As exhaustion finally pulled her under, Elena's last conscious thought was that she was in far deeper than she had ever intended to be. And strangely, she didn't regret it at all. Elena woke to golden sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the immediate realization that she was alone. The space beside her was still warm, the sheets still holding Dante's scent, telling her he hadn't been gone long. She sat up slowly, pulling his shirt tighter around herself, trying to process everything that had happened. The events of the previous night felt almost dreamlike in the morning light. Had she really shared dinner with Dante Salvatore? Had she really opened up about her poetry and her dreams? Had she really fallen asleep in his arms, feeling safer than she had in years? A soft knock at the door made her freeze. "Come in," she called hesitantly, pulling the covers up higher. A young woman entered carrying a tray laden with breakfast. She was one of the newer staff members, someone Elena had seen around but never really talked to. The woman's expression was carefully neutral, professionally blank, giving away nothing of what she thought about finding the housekeeper in the boss's bed. "Mr. Salvatore asked me to bring you breakfast," she said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "He's in meetings, but said to tell you he'll see you later. He also said you should take your time, that there's no rush." "Thank you," Elena managed, her face burning with embarrassment. The woman nodded and left, closing the door softly behind her. Elena stared at the tray, fresh fruit arranged artfully, pastries that were still warm and flaky, coffee that smelled like heaven, and beside the plate, a single red rose with a note in Dante's precise handwriting. Had to handle some business that couldn't wait. "Don't disappear on me. We're not done talking. I want to take you somewhere tonight." Elena read the note 3 times, something warm and terrifying blooming in her chest, despite all her reservations. She ate breakfast slowly, trying to figure out what came next. Did she go back to her room and change into her uniform? Did she try to act like nothing had changed? Did she wait here for Dante to return? In the end, she decided to shower and dress in her own clothes, intending to slip back to the staff quarters and maintain some semblance of normalcy. But fate had other plans. Because halfway down the corridor, still damp from the shower and wearing yesterday's navy dress, she ran into a man she had never seen before. He was tall and dark-haired, probably in his early 40s, with cold eyes that assessed her with uncomfortable intensity. Everything about him screamed danger, from his expensive suit to the way he carried himself with casual menace. "You must be Elena," he said, his accent different from the local Neapolitan dialect, Roman, maybe, or further north. "I've heard very interesting things about you." Elena's instincts screamed at her to run, to get away from this man as quickly as possible. "I don't believe we've met. If you're here to see Mr. Salvatore, I can find someone to help you. Oh, I don't need an appointment. Dante and I go way back. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm Luca Rossi. That name mean anything to you? Elena's blood went cold. The Rossi family. The ones making moves against Dante's territory. The ones he had been dealing with. I'm not involved in Mr. Salvatore's business affairs. That's not what I hear. Luca took a step closer, and Elena found herself backing up instinctively. Word on the street is that Dante has finally found something he cares about more than his empire. Something that makes him vulnerable. That makes you very valuable, Elena. Let me go, Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady, even though fear was clawing at her throat. Whatever business you have, it's with him, not me. In a moment. Luca's hand shot out, catching her arm, not hurting her. Not yet. But the threat was implicit in every line of his body. First, I want you to deliver a message for me. Tell Dante that his refusal to negotiate is going to cost him. Tell him that territories don't belong to anyone forever. Tell him that if he continues to be unreasonable, I'll have to take more direct measures to get his attention. I'm not delivering anything. Elena tried to pull away, but Luca's grip tightened. You will if you know what's good for you. See, Dante might think he's protecting you, keeping you hidden away in his fortress. But we've been watching. We know you go to the market on Thursday mornings. We know you visit that little bookshop on Via Toledo every other Sunday. We know. Tell him yourself. The voice came from behind them, cold and absolutely lethal. Elena's heart leaped as she turned to see Dante standing there, flanked by two men she recognized as part of his personal security detail. His expression was murderous, every line of his body radiating controlled violence. Luca released Elena immediately, stepping back with his hands raised in a gesture of false surrender. Dante, I was just delivering a message to your lovely friend here. By threatening her, Dante moved past Elena, putting himself between her and Luca with deliberate precision. You come into my home without invitation. You put your hands on someone under my protection. You make threats against her safety. And you expect me to listen to anything you have to say? She's just a housekeeper, Luca said. But there was uncertainty creeping into his voice now. I was simply being thorough. She's mine. The words came out as a growl, primitive and possessive. And if you ever touch her again, if you even look at her wrong, if you so much as think about using her to get to me, I will burn your entire family's operation to the ground. Your clubs, your restaurants, your legitimate businesses, all of it. I'll make sure the Rossi name becomes a cautionary tale that people tell their children. Do you understand me? The silence that followed was deafening. Elena watched as some kind of understanding passed between the two men, an acknowledgement of lines crossed and prices to be paid. This isn't over, Dante, Luca said finally, but he was already backing toward the exit. The Northern Territories are none of your concern, Dante interrupted. But since you came all this way to deliver a message, let me give you one to take back to your uncle. Tell him that I'm willing to meet. Neutral ground, both of us. No weapons, just talking. But if he sends any more of his people into my home, if he makes any more moves against what's mine, negotiation is off the table. Is that clear enough for you? Luca's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I'll relay the message. You do that. Marco will show you out. And Luca, if I ever see you near Elena again, negotiations won't save you. Once Luca was gone, escorted out by security, Dante turned to Elena. The fury was still there in his eyes, barely contained, but underneath it was something else. Fear. Raw, genuine fear that made her chest tight. Are you okay? His hands came up to frame her face, searching for any sign of injury. Did he hurt you? Did he touch you anywhere else? I'm fine, Elena managed, her voice shaking slightly. Just scared. He knew things, Dante. About my routine. About where I go. He's been watching me. Dante pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She felt him trembling, felt the rapid beat of his heart against her cheek, felt the depth of his fear for her safety. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair, his voice rough. "God, Elena, I'm so sorry. I should have known they would try something like this. Should have increased your security. Should have been more careful about letting you out of my sight." Elena pulled back enough to look up at him. "This is your world. Violence and threats and people using each other as leverage. How can I possibly be part of this?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Dante's hands came up to cup her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Because I won't let anything happen to you. Because I'm going to end this war with the Rossis once and for all. And when I do, you'll be safe. I swear it on everything I have, on my father's memory, on my own life. You will be safe." "How can you promise that? You can't control everything. Watch me." The fierce determination in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made something possessive and protective bloom in her own chest. "I've been playing nice, trying to find peaceful solutions, trying to be the man my mother wanted me to be, instead of the one this world demands. But they threatened you, Elena. They put their hands on you. That changes everything." "What are you going to do?" Dante's expression hardened into something cold and calculated. "What I should have done weeks ago when the Rossis first started testing our borders. I'm going to remind everyone why the Salvatore name still commands respect in this city. I'm going to make it very clear that some things are off limits. And you, Elena, you are completely off limits." He kissed her then, hard and claiming, pouring every ounce of possessive protectiveness into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "I have to go handle this. But I need you to stay in the main house for the next few days. Marco will be with you at all times when you leave your room. Paolo and 2 others will be on rotation outside wherever you are. I know it feels like a prison, but it's temporary, just until I can neutralize this threat. Can you do that for me?" Elena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she didn't need constant guards, that she could take care of herself. But the memory of Luca's cold eyes and knowing smile was too fresh. "Okay. But be careful, Dante, please. Always." He kissed her once more, then pulled away, his mask of control sliding back into place with practiced ease. He turned to the men waiting in the hall. "No one gets near her. I don't care who they are, what credentials they have, or what authority they claim. Elena is under my personal protection as of right now. Spread the word to everyone. She is not to be touched, not to be threatened, not to be used as leverage. Anyone who violates that answers to me directly." Then he was gone, striding down the hallway with the confidence of a man going to war. Elena stood there, still tasting him on her lips, still feeling the imprint of his hands on her face, and wondered what she had gotten herself into. The next few days were tense and surreal. Dante was gone more than he was present, handling whatever needed to be handled to end the conflict with the Rossis. When he did return home, it was often late at night, his expression drawn and exhausted, sometimes with blood on his knuckles that he tried to hide, but she always noticed. Elena fell into a strange routine. Marco shadowed her everywhere, a silent presence who was somehow both comforting and unnerving. The other staff members treated her differently now, with a mixture of respect and wariness. Some were supportive, offering small smiles of encouragement. Others kept their distance, as if afraid that associating with her might draw unwanted attention. Maria still spoke to her, though her warnings had become more dire. "You should leave while you still can," she said one afternoon, while they were preparing vegetables in the kitchen. Before you're in so deep you can't find your way out. I can't leave, Elena admitted, chopping carrots with more force than necessary. Even if I wanted to. Because you think you love him? Maria's tone was gentle, understanding. Because I know I do. The confession felt both liberating and terrifying. I love him, Maria. God help me, but I do. And I think he loves me too. The older woman sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. Then I'll pray for you, child, because loving men like Dante Salvatore, it's not easy. It's not safe. It costs something every single day. But maybe, if you're very lucky and very strong, it might be worth it. That night, Dante returned home looking utterly exhausted. There was blood on his knuckles again, and what looked like the beginning of a bruise along his jaw. He tried to go straight to his study, but Elena intercepted him. "Come with me," she said softly, taking his hand. He didn't argue, just let her lead him to his bathroom. Elena carefully cleaned his knuckles, each swipe of the cloth an act of care and concern. The cuts weren't deep, just scraped and raw, but they spoke of violence she didn't want to think about too closely. "You don't have to do this," Dante said quietly, watching her work with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I know." Elena bandaged his knuckles with gentle precision, her touch as tender as she could make it. "But I want to. Let me take care of you for once." When she finished, Dante pulled her into his lap without warning, burying his face in her neck. She felt him breathe her in, felt the tension slowly drain from his body as he held her close. "It's almost done," he murmured against her skin. "The Rossis have agreed to back off. We're signing a formal agreement tomorrow. New territory lines, clear boundaries, consequences for violations. You'll be safe soon. I promise." "What did you do?" Elena asked, running her fingers through his hair. "Things I'm not proud of. Things I'll probably have nightmares about. But you're going to be safe, and that's all that matters to me right now." Elena pulled back enough to look at him, to really see the toll this was taking. "I love you," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them, before she could second-guess or overthink. Dante went completely still. Then he pulled back, his eyes searching hers with desperate intensity, looking for any sign that she didn't mean it, that she was just saying what she thought he wanted to hear. "Say that again. I love you." Elena's voice was stronger this time, more certain. "I know I shouldn't. I know this is complicated and dangerous and probably insane. I know you're my employer and I depend on you, and this violates every rule of appropriate boundaries. But I love you anyway. I love you so much it terrifies me." The smile that broke across Dante's face was like watching the sun rise after the longest night. He kissed her deeply, thoroughly, pouring every ounce of emotion into it, until she was dizzy and breathless. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were bright with something that looked suspiciously like tears. "I love you too," he said, each word deliberate and weighted with meaning. "I've loved you since that night you walked out in that red dress and made me realize what I'd been missing all along. I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my entire life, and I'm going to spend every day proving it to you, if you'll let me." Every day. Elena's heart was racing, hope and fear warring in her chest. "That's a pretty long commitment." "Not long enough." Dante's hands framed her face with infinite tenderness. "I want forever with you, Elena. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to hear about your dreams and support them and watch you become everything you're meant to be. I know I'm not what you probably imagined when you thought about falling in love. I know my world is dark and dangerous and full of things that should make you run as fast as you can in the opposite direction. But I'm asking you to stay anyway. I'm asking you to build a life with me, whatever that looks like, however we need to make it work." Elena thought about all the very valid reasons she should say no. The danger, the impossibility, the vast gulf between their worlds. But then she thought about how he made her feel. Seen in a way no one ever had before. Valued for who she was rather than what she could do. Loved with a fierce, protective devotion that both terrified and thrilled her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." Dante kissed her again, and this time there was pure joy in it, bright and undeniable and overwhelming. They made their way to his bed, falling asleep tangled together. Two people who had found something unexpected and precious in the least likely of places. The agreement with the Rossis was signed the next day without incident. Dante came home that evening looking lighter than she had seen him in days, the weight of constant vigilance finally lifting from his shoulders. He swept Elena into his arms the moment he saw her, spinning her around like something out of a movie. "It's done," he said, setting her down but keeping her close. "It's really done. You're safe now. We can actually breathe." Over the following weeks, Elena's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined. Dante was true to his word, treating her not as an employee, but as his partner in every sense that mattered. He introduced her to his most trusted advisors as someone important, someone whose opinions carried weight. He made space for her in his world, listened when she had ideas about the legitimate businesses he was building, valued her perspective even when it challenged his own assumptions. The staff noticed the shift. Some were genuinely happy for them, glad to see Dante finally finding something that made him smile. Others were more skeptical, convinced Elena was just another passing fancy that would fade when the novelty wore off. But Elena was too focused on building something real to care what anyone else thought. Dante surprised her constantly, with small gifts that showed he paid attention to her passing comments, with quiet evenings where they read side by side, comfortable in companionable silence, with fierce protection that made her feel cherished without being stifled. And most surprisingly, with his willingness to change patterns of behavior that had been set for years, making room in his carefully controlled life for spontaneity and softness and vulnerability. 6 months after that first night in the red dress, Dante took Elena on a drive down the coast. They wound through narrow roads with breathtaking views of the Mediterranean, music playing softly, Dante's hand resting on her knee like it belonged there. When they finally stopped, it was in front of a small house perched on a cliff overlooking the sea. It was modest compared to the estate, but beautifully appointed, with a wraparound porch and a garden that overlooked the waves. "I bought this last month," Dante said, watching her reaction carefully. "I thought maybe we could use it as a retreat, somewhere we can be just us, without the weight of everything else. Somewhere you can have that garden you talked about." Elena stared at the house, at the garden space, at the view that looked like something out of a dream. "You bought a house by the sea." "I bought our house by the sea." Dante pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Because you make me believe in impossible things. Because I want mornings where the only sound is waves instead of phone calls and emergencies. Because I want to give you the space to write your poetry and watch you grow things and share breakfast with you for the rest of my life without anyone else intruding." "I don't have the words," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Then show me." Dante's smile was soft, full of love and promise. "Show me by staying, by building this life with me, by letting me love you the way you deserve." Elena kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling through tears. "There's one more thing," Dante said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring. Not ostentatious or flashy, just a simple platinum band with a single perfect diamond. I know we've only been together for 6 months. I know this is fast, and probably seems crazy to anyone looking from the outside. But I also know that I don't want to spend another day without you being mine in every way that counts. Elena Ricci, will you marry me? Elena stared at the ring, at the man holding it, at the future being offered to her. A year ago, she had been invisible, content to exist in the shadows, accepting that her life would always be small and quiet and unremarkable. Now she was being asked to step fully into the light, to claim a life she had never dared to dream of. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, I'll marry you." Dante slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache in the best possible way. When they finally broke apart, they stood together on the porch of their house, looking out at the sea, two people who had found each other against all odds. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Dante's world would always carry some element of danger, would always require vigilance and strength. But standing there in his arms, Elena knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. With the man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had made her believe she was worth loving, who had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. Their wedding 3 months later was small and intimate, just close friends and the family members Dante trusted most. Elena wore white, but she carried red roses, a nod to the beginning of their story. And when Dante slipped the wedding band onto her finger, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You're mine now," he whispered as they stood at the altar. "I've been yours since the moment you asked where I was going in that dress," Elena replied. They honeymooned at their house by the sea, spending 2 weeks wrapped up in each other, building the foundation of their marriage away from the pressures and demands of Dante's empire. They talked about the future, about the children they might have someday, about the dreams they were going to chase together. And when they finally returned to Naples, it was as true partners in every sense. Elena took on a more active role in the legitimate businesses Dante was building, using her sharp mind and careful observation to help him navigate challenges. She became his confidant, his advisor, the person he trusted above all others. The men who worked for Dante learned quickly to treat her with the same respect they showed their boss, and the other families learned that Elena Salvatore was not a weakness to be exploited, but a strength that made Dante even more formidable. Because a man with nothing to lose was dangerous, but a man protecting the woman he loved was absolutely lethal. Years passed. Elena's poetry was eventually published under a pseudonym, her words touching readers she would never meet, giving voice to the small, beautiful moments that most people overlooked. The garden at their seaside house flourished, becoming a sanctuary they returned to whenever life became overwhelming. And through it all, their love deepened and strengthened, becoming the unshakable foundation everything else was built on. The girl who had once been invisible had become impossible to overlook. And the man who had built an empire on control had learned that the greatest power came from loving someone enough to be vulnerable. Together, they had created something neither of them thought possible, a life full of passion, partnership, and a love that would last forever. If you enjoyed Elena and Dante's journey from invisible maid to beloved wife, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next dark romance story. Drop a comment telling me what you loved most about their story, and let me know what other romance tropes you'd love to see on this channel. More possessive heroes? Enemies to lovers? Second chance romances? Tell me what makes your heart race, and I'll bring you more stories that deliver exactly what you're craving. Until next time, keep believing in love that breaks all the rules.